Hello, I'm Mouth66, and have you ever wondered why Liverpool have a minute of silence before a specific game in April of every year? Have you ever wondered how one of the driving factors in Steven Gerrard's motivation actually came about? Have you ever wondered why Liverpool fans absolutely despise the Sun newspaper? And have you ever wondered why social media found this shirt so cruel? Well, they weren't wrong, that shirt is foul. Well, on Saturday the 15th of April 1989, Liverpool and Nottingham Forest played out an FA Cup semi-final match at Sheffield Wednesday's Hillsborough ground, and the game was called off after 6 minutes after a crush of fans in the Liverpool end. It killed 97 people and left 766 injured, and it's still the worst disaster in English football history. And since this disaster happened 37 years ago today, let's have a talk about it. For those of you who don't know, this is the Hillsborough disaster explained. I'll try my best. If I get something wrong, just please don't report me. That has happened before. I got something wrong in a video once, and someone commented saying,
"Reported you for these lies."
Dickhead. Anyway, Hillsborough. So the context of this game is that it was an FA Cup semi-final match in 1989 between Liverpool and Nottingham Forest, and it was going to be held at Sheffield Wednesday's Hillsborough ground. On the 15th of April 1989, the game was due to kick off at 3 PM. Now, as is common in most neutral venue games, both sets of fans were separated. Pretty much any final you can think of, FA Cup, Carabao Cup, or playoff in the lower leagues, all of those games have fairly equal but separated sections for each set of fans to sit in. And for this game, Liverpool fans have been allocated the west and north stands of Hillsborough with around 24,000 tickets. Forest fans have been allocated the east and south stands of Hillsborough and about 29,000 tickets. Already a bad sign because more Liverpool fans will be attending than Forest fans. But still, those figures remained. On the west and north side of Hillsborough, that also meant that Liverpool fans would all have to come through one entrance, Leppings Lane. And the entrance on Leppings Lane was a tight bottleneck, directly on the corner of the street itself. 9,000 Liverpool supporters had tickets for the north stand, and they had 10 turnstiles to get through, meaning that with an hour left before the game, 16 people would have to pass through each turnstile per minute. Yep, I'm just as surprised as you. I can actually do maths. But yes, that worrying statistic is quite surprising as well. 4,456 Liverpool fans had tickets for the upper west stand, and they had 6 turnstiles to get through. Using that same maths, that's 12 people through each turnstile every minute. 1 every 5 seconds. It's better, but not much better. But here's the worst statistic. 10,100 Liverpool fans had tickets for the lower west stand, which were standing terraces, and they had just 7 turnstiles to get through. That's 24 people through each turnstile per minute. 3 guesses which section of the stadium the disaster happened in. On the lower tier of the west stand, people would be separated from the pitch by very high fences, and individual sections called pens would also be divided by high fences, and gates between them were at the back. So the more full the pens became, the harder it would be to switch. There have been many FA Cup finals at Hillsborough before, and concerns had always been raised about the Leppings Lane end, with many reports of overcrowding problems, crushes, and just heavy disorganisation. In 1987, Leeds and Coventry had played at Hillsborough, and Leeds fans had reported troubles in Leppings Lane. They also reported no steward direction inside the stadium or outside. Inside the stadium, some fans would be pulled from the standing terraces up to the upper west tier just to escape the crush, and some fans were so compressed that they weren't able to raise their hands. So yes, Leeds fans weren't happy, Liverpool fans weren't happy, but still, Hillsborough would be the venue. And the policing for the game was also questionable. The previous semi-final at Hillsborough had been taken charge by Chief Superintendent Brian L. Mole, a man more experienced of dealing with sold-out football games and a man with more of a knowledge of the layout of Hillsborough. But because of some sort of fake prank, where many officers were released from the Hillsborough job, he left for a job in Barnsley in 1989, meaning that for the 1989 semi-final, the man in charge of the game would be Chief Superintendent David Duckenfield, and compared to Mole, he was a pile of soggy clothes. He had next to no experience in taking charge of sold-out football matches, or any knowledge of the layout of Hillsborough, which would have been fine had he actually pre-planned anything before the game, and that would turn out to be a serious setback. By 2 PM on the day, about 2,100 Liverpool fans with tickets for the standing terraces had made their way through the turnstiles and down to the pens. They would go through the turnstiles and head down the central tunnel that led directly into the central pens behind the goal, pens number 3 and 4. 2:15 and the crowd was starting to build up outside, and the flow through the turnstiles was not any faster. Inside the stadium, a loudspeaker message was played to ask the fans in the central pens to spread across and move along sideways, to make room for the 8,000 fans that still needed to come in. Jumped to 2:45 PM and the turnstile tally was at a worrying low. Leppings Lane was massively overcrowding. People who had shown tickets for either the wrong turnstiles or not had tickets at all, they couldn't leave because of the amount of crowd behind them. The turnstile tally was 5,500, meaning that in 15 minutes, 5,600 Liverpool fans with tickets for the standing terraces needed to get through the turnstiles. That maths equation from earlier turns out as nearly 53 per minute, nearly 1 per second. Police officers were stranded in crowds full of people that couldn't move. Police Chief Superintendent David Duckenfield and South Yorkshire Constabulary discussed whether to delay the kick-off by 20 minutes to allow more time for fans to get into the ground, but for some strange reason they declined that request, instead deciding on this. To the right of the turnstiles, there was a large exit gate used to let fans leave after the game, labelled Gate C. With the outside of Leppings Lane now massively overcrowded, police decided they wanted to open Gate C to relieve the pressure outside. And while it would have done that, many fans that would have got through Gate C would go straight down into pens 3 and 4, which were already massively overcrowded. But they eventually did open Gate C, and for 5 minutes while that was opened, 2,000 Liverpool fans entered and headed straight down into those central pens. And this is the monumental mistake that led to the disaster itself. Duckenfield had opened the gate, but not directed Liverpool fans into other parts of the West Stand. The game kicked off at 3 PM, with the crush at pens 3 and 4 now highly dangerous. A few minutes into the game, Liverpool's Peter Beardsley hit the crossbar, which is probably the reason that a crowd surge happened. One of the barriers in pen 3 broke, and people in the pen fell forwards, increasing the pressure on those at the front. Then at 3:06 PM, the police stopped the game as a result of the crush getting too intense. The players left the field. Those at the front of the pens tried to escape through the narrow gates, and those at the back were pulled to safety by those in the upper West Stand. Off-duty doctors and nurses attempted CPR, and some fans tore off advertising hoardings to carry the injured. The first ambulance arrived on the pitch at 3:14, but many fans were already fatally injured. 97 people were killed, 766 were injured. Most fans died as a result of compressive asphyxia, meaning that because of the piles of people, they couldn't expand their chests out to breathe. 94 died on the day, 3 more died from injuries they sustained while there, 1 died 4 more days later in hospital, 1 died in 1993 after being taken off life support, and the final victim spent 8 years in a vegetative state before finally being able to communicate again. He died in 2021. It's also said that there's a 98th victim, a man who, because of work problems, he sold his ticket to a friend who eventually died in the disaster. He took his own life in February 2011 as a result of survivor's guilt, and the event is still the worst disaster in UK sport of all time. It's also one of the UK's longest spanning court cases, which brings us to the hearings and the inquiries of fans. Originally, authorities blamed the fans, which must have seemed the responsible decision back in the 70s and 80s. English fan bases in particular were known for violence and hooliganism, and Liverpool and every other English club were already on a ban from European competition after the Heysel disaster of 1985, and the reason for the crush was quote unquote because fans were drunk and late. Apparently there were many forced eyewitness statements to remove criticism of South Yorkshire police. Duckenfield himself even claimed that Liverpool fans had forced Gate C open to get in. He didn't admit to his mistakes, and neither did South Yorkshire police. And then the Sun and Kelvin Mackenzie came along. This man is probably about as welcome in the city of Liverpool as the guy who murdered John Lennon. Mackenzie published a newspaper article in the Sun a couple days later titled The Truth.
Some fans picked pockets of victims. Some fans urinated on brave cops. Some fans beat up PC giving Kiss of Life.
Yeah, but that's not the worst part. If you look into the history of this article, you'll find that Mackenzie originally planned to name it You Scum, a phrase that only Man United fans and Paul Konchesky's mum will call Scousers now. Apparently there were Liverpool fans that told a female officer that they would have sex with a female victim. Are we sure that happened? Since then, there's been full-on campaigns in Liverpool to stop people buying copies of The Sun, and the victims' families fought for years for justice. They all believed it was unlawful killing, that the lack of police control was responsible, but the only people that believed them was the city of Liverpool itself and themselves. There were coroner's hearings in 1989, 1991 and 2012, until the truth finally came out in 2016. Victims' families heard what they wanted to hear. Liverpool fans were blameless in the disaster, and it was all down to the lack of police control. Duckenfield finally admitted that when he opened Gate C, he froze and realised the mistake he had made by not closing off the gates to the central tunnel. Apologies flooded in from David Cameron, SYP and Kelvin McKenzie. The latter came out and soon said he was duped into publishing his original article, despite not taking any responsibility for that mistake. But after 27 years of lies, Liverpool Football Club, the victims and the victims' families finally got their justice. Now, ever since the disaster, Liverpool have had a moment of silence before every game closest to the 15th of April. Last year, there was a moment of silence in Liverpool City Centre, and at Liverpool's game against West Ham a couple days before the 15th, and now there's next to no standing terraces in any stadium across England as a safety measure. It's moments like these where you just have to put your hatred aside and mourn. Isn't that right, sir? Rest in peace to the 97, you will never walk alone. Thank you.